A green new world or just more of the same? Mark Carney, the former head honcho of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, wants to save the world. Or so he says. His climate plan, dressed up in the language of green revolution and sustainable development, promises a brighter future. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find the same old story. More power for the powerful, more burdens for the rest of us, more liberals like Trudeau. Carney's plan, like many green initiatives, deserves a healthy dose of skepticism. Is this really about saving the planet, or is it about consolidating control in the hands of a select few? He wants to redirect trillions of dollars towards green investments. Sounds great on paper, right? But who controls these trillions? And who gets to decide what counts as green? It's about reshaping the global economy from the top down. Don't be fooled by the greenwashing. The price of net zero. Your wallet is feeling lighter. At the heart of Carney's plan is the goal of net zero emissions. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? But in the real world, achieving net zero means drastically cutting back on our energy consumption. And that means higher prices for everything. It needs to be phased out, not abruptly brought to an end. Heating your home, fueling your car, buying groceries, all of these activities rely on energy. As governments and corporations scramble to meet these ambitious net zero targets, the costs will inevitably trickle down to you, the consumer. Get ready for higher energy bills, more expensive goods and services, and a lower standard of living. If living has become unaffordable now, Carney has stated we don't pay enough. Of course, they'll tell you it's a small price to pay to save the planet. But while you're struggling to make ends meet, the elites pushing these policies will be perfectly insulated from the economic fallout. The net zero agenda is sold as a win-win for the planet and the economy. Banks, the enforcers of green policies and profiteers. Who gets to decide which businesses are green and which ones are not? The answer, unsurprisingly, is banks. Under Carney's plan, these financial institutions are being tasked with enforcing net zero policies. They're the ones who will decide which companies get loans, which projects get funded, and ultimately which sectors of the economy thrive or wither. Banks are not charities. They're in the business of making money. So, when they're given the power to control the flow of trillions of dollars in green investments, you can bet they'll find a way to line their own pockets in the process. Imagine this. A bank invests heavily in a green energy company that just happens to be run by a former bank executive. Banks are already some of the most powerful institutions on the planet. Giving them even more control over the global economy in the name of climate change is like giving an arsonist the keys to the fire station. Carbon taxes for thee, private jets for me. One of the most touted tools in the fight against climate change is the carbon tax. The idea is simple. Make polluters pay for the environmental damage they cause. In theory, this should incentivize companies to reduce their emissions and invest in cleaner technologies. In practice, it's a different story. Carbon taxes disproportionately impact the poor and the middle class. When you raise the price of fuel, it's not the wealthy who feel the pinch. It's the working families who rely on their cars to get to work, the elderly who struggle to heat their homes in the winter, and the small businesses struggling to stay afloat who bear the brunt of these policies. Meanwhile, the elites who preach the virtues of carbon taxes often seem exempt from their own rules. Have you seen the plethora of SUVs wherever Trudeau goes? Carbon taxes might sound good in principle, but in practice they often amount to little more than a regressive tax that punishes the poor. CBDCs, your money, their control, Have you heard about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs? They're the latest shiny object in the world of finance. The official line is that CBDCs will promote financial inclusion, reduce costs, and modernize the financial system. But there's a darker side to this technology that has many people concerned. Imagine a world where every single transaction you make is tracked and monitored by the government. With CBDCs, this dystopian vision could become a reality. Unlike cash, which offers a degree of anonymity, CBDCs would give central banks unprecedented control over your money. Want to donate to a political cause the government doesn't like? Your transaction could be blocked, exceed your monthly carbon allowance. Your digital wallet could be frozen. The potential for surveillance and control is chilling. Proponents of CBDCs argue that these concerns are overblown, but do you really trust these globalists? The just transition from fossil fuels to unemployment line. As we transition away from fossil fuels, what happens to the millions of people employed in these industries? The answer, according to the architects of the green economy, is a just transition. It's a catchy phrase, but what does it actually mean? In theory, a just transition means providing retraining and support for workers displaced by the shift to clean energy. It means creating new green jobs to replace the ones lost in the fossil fuel sector. Sounds great in theory, right? But the reality is far more complicated. Retraining programs are expensive and often ineffective. Many workers in the fossil fuel industry have spent their entire lives in these jobs. It's not easy to teach an old dog new tricks, especially when those new tricks involve complex and rapidly evolving technologies. The just transition often feels like a euphemism for mass unemployment and economic devastation. Follow the green. Who really profits from climate policies? So if the costs of these climate policies are borne by ordinary people, who reaps the benefits? It's a question worth asking, and it leads us to an organization called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ. Founded by Mark Carney, GFANZ is a coalition of financial institutions that have pledged to align their investments with the goal of net zero emissions. Sounds impressive, right? But GFANZ has been accused of being little more than a greenwashing scheme for some of the world's biggest polluters. Here's how it works. A company can continue to emit greenhouse gases with impunity as long as they offset their emissions by investing in things like tree planting or renewable energy projects. It's a classic case of having your cake and eating it too. Companies get to claim they're doing their part to fight climate change while continuing to profit from polluting activities. And who benefits from this arrangement? You guessed it, the financial institutions that facilitate these offset schemes. They get to collect fees, earn interest on loans, and boost their green credentials. All while the planet continues to warm. GFANZ is just one example of how the climate movement has been hijacked by corporate interests. Now it's time to use your thinking caps, my fellow Canadians. Why, in God's name, do we like controversy? We just survived a government that had more scandals than we can keep track of. Now this guy has already been caught in numerous lies. You want 4 more years of this? I certainly don't. Let's use our common sense. Go Pierre!